Westminster Hall to talk to Mari Takayanagi, who is the Senior Archivist at the Parliamentary Archives, and we're going to be discussing the 1866 Women's Suffrage Petition. So I'd like to start off by asking, who was actually behind the petition in 1866?
The women behind the 1866 Women's Suffrage Petition were the Kensington Society, and this was a debating society made up of middle-class, educated women, the kind of women who would have gone to university had they been allowed to go to university in this period, which they weren't. And they got together and discussed various subjects, and in November 1865 they discussed votes for women. Should women have the vote? And following that debate, some of the women got together and decided they ought to do something about it, and so they got up the 1866 Women's Suffrage Petition. And although the women that organised it were middle class and based in London, actually it became a national movement. These women went out and they used family and friendship networks and got signatures from all over the country, across the UK and Ireland. From friends, from family, from neighbours. They walked down the streets. They got the wives of their greengrocers there, their fishmongers. They got women who were teachers, who were seamstresses to sign. And as a result of which, they gathered 1,500 signatures from all over the UK and Ireland.
How was the petition actually presented?
So the petition was presented in Parliament by John Stuart Mill, who was a philosopher and a well-known Liberal MP. Now, he'd been elected the previous year, in 1865, on an election platform that included votes for women. And so he was sympathetic to the cause. There was also a lot of other discussion in Parliament going on about the need for votes for more men at this period, which led to the 1867 Reform Act. And so it was the ideal time for a petition to be presented. And John Stuart Mill agreed to present it if they could get at least 100 signatures, and they got well over that. On the 7th of June 1866, two of the women who had led the gathering of the signatures, Elizabeth Garrett and Emily Davis, brought the petition right here to Westminster Hall, the heart of Parliament, to present it to John Stuart Mill. And Westminster Hall was a bustling place in those days, and the women felt conspicuous walking up and down with this long roll containing all these signatures. And there was a woman selling apples there, and they hid the petition under her apple cart to avoid sort of attracting this attention. And when John Stuart Mill arrived, a few minutes later, he couldn't see the petition, and they explained, oh, it's under the cart. And this scene was immortalised in a painting 40 years later by Bertha Newcombe, a suffrage campaigner. I think it's a fantastic story.
And once the petition had been presented, what was the reaction in Parliament?
So it was presented on the 7th of June. A month later, John Stuart Mill spoke about the subject in Parliament. And then a year later, during the passage of the Second Reform Bill, John Stuart Mill introduced an amendment to try and allow women to vote. And this was debated at length, and it failed, but it got 73 votes in favour, which was a lot more than Mill had expected. When you think of what a niche, difficult subject this was in this, it's quite remarkable that he managed to convince 73 male MPs to vote for this subject, thanks in part to the fact that he could point to the petition in 1860 and show this was entirely signed by women, organised by women, women want the vote. And if it hadn't been for that, he would not have been able to stand up in Parliament and say women want the vote. And so it was a really necessary starting point for all the campaigning that followed over the years.
What would you say were the most significant outcomes of the 1866 petition then?
So the 1866 petition was significant as the first in 16,000 petitions presented over the next 50 years, containing signatures of more than 3 million women. You need to start somewhere, and they started as a mass movement in 1866 with 1,500 signatures. 2 years later, they were able to gather 21,000 signatures for a petition. By the end of the 19th century, you have a petition presented with nearly 250,000 signatures on it. So from small acorns, mighty oaks grow. You have to start somewhere, and they started in 1866.
How is the petition and the women who are behind it actually commemorated today in Parliament?
Parliament remembers all the women who campaigned for women's suffrage in New Dawn, the women's suffrage artwork by Mary Branson, which is a light installation right here in Westminster Hall, seen by every visitor to Parliament. It's all the different colours of all the different women's suffrage organisations, not just the obvious suffragette, purple, green and white, but all the other colours as well. It was unveiled on the 7th of June 2016, 150 years to the very day that the 1866 suffrage petition came here to Westminster Hall.